All right, got lots of folks that have hopped on. So I will go ahead and get us started for today. So my name is Alicia Watley. I'm with Kentucky Youth Advocates, and I want to just say first, thank you to everyone who has hopped on, advocates from all over the state that are joining us today for this conversation. It is day 2 of Children's Advocacy Week, so thanks for being there, showing up for all of the events that we have offered today and all week long. We're really excited to have you all. Before we dive into our conversation today, I'd like to just first take a moment to say thank you to our signature sponsor, Aetna Better Health of Kentucky, and our strategist sponsors, Hager Foundation and Save the Children. And also a huge thank you to our many advocate and partner sponsors. Children's Advocacy Week and this event in particular really would not be possible without your all's support. And anybody who's watching can check out the full list of our sponsors on our website. So we are thrilled to have you all advocates from around the state here. We're going to be diving into kids issues during the 2025 legislative session. We have 2 elected leaders here today that we're going to hear from about kind of their own journey, how they got to Frankfort, how they identify and work on priorities for Kentucky kids, and how folks like you, advocates around the state, can really support the efforts that they talk about today. So before we dive into some questions with our panelists, I want to first give them a quick introduction. So joining us this morning, Representative Robert Duvall. Rep. Duvall represents part of Warren County and Bowling Green, and he began serving in the Kentucky House of Representatives in 2023, and he now brings his personal experience as an optometrist to his position as the Vice Chair of the House Health Services Committee. So welcome, Representative Duvall. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And alongside him, we also have Senator Cassie Chambers Armstrong. Senator Chambers Armstrong is an Eastern Kentucky native, but now lives in Louisville, where she previously served on Metro Council before beginning her service in the Kentucky Senate in 2023. Senator Chambers Armstrong brings her experience as an attorney, providing free legal aid to low-income families, to her work in Frankfort today. So thank you so much, Senator, for being here this morning.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and have a conversation with y'all.
Yeah, we're so happy that you all made some time. I know it's a really busy time during the legislative session, lots of committee meetings, lots of priorities happening this week and all the time. So we appreciate you all finding some time to talk to our advocates today. So I want to first just talk to you all a little bit about maybe how you got to where you are now. Kentucky Youth Advocates' vision is for Kentucky to be the best place in America to be young. And we would love to hear from both of you all. Tell us a little bit about yourself when you were a kid or maybe in your younger years and how that led you to running for office where you are today. Representative, do you want to get us started?
Absolutely. Yes. It's such a pleasure to be here with everyone today, and I appreciate the invitation. So I was born and raised in Kentucky. So I was born in Muhlenberg County, and grew up very humble background. Grew up in a mobile home till I was 15 years old. And so it was one of those situations where we had a lot of love in our family, but not a lot of money. And so I was always challenged and encouraged to work hard and to strive for my dreams. And so I've never forgotten that. Because I do believe we live in such a great place where dreams can be realized. That when a child is encouraged to be their best, when a child is encouraged to dream big, great things can happen. And I'm thankful for the adults who were in my life when I was growing up that really pushed me that direction. And so that sort of led me on the journey of going to college and going to optometry school, and been back in Bowling Green, like I said, for about 30 years now, and absolutely love what I'm doing.
Great. I can go next. And I did not realize, Representative Duvall, that we have such similar backgrounds. That's why I love doing these panels, because you also learn things about your fellow legislators. I was born into poverty in Eastern Kentucky, and the story I like to tell is that when my parents brought me home from the hospital, it was to a mobile home, and they couldn't afford to run the air conditioning in that mobile home because they couldn't afford to pay for the bill if they'd had an electric bill that high. And although I grew up in a family without a lot of resources, I ended up having a lot of opportunities. I went to Yale College, Harvard Law School, and the London School of Economics as a Fulbright scholar. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how I was able to have those opportunities, given that I didn't have a lot of material things in my life when I was born. And I realized that it was a lot of people that sacrificed to provide those opportunities, a lot of folks in my family, a lot of folks in my community, and quite frankly, good government programs that can support people on their journey out of poverty. And so now that I get to be in the decision-making role of helping set those policies, I try to use my experience around what created opportunities for me and for other kids like me, and try to bring those opportunities and create those opportunities for other kids throughout Kentucky. Specifically, the other reason that I really love being a policymaker, I started off my career in direct services, working with clients, working with low-income survivors of domestic violence and kids that had experienced child abuse. And what was really frustrating, I have such respect for those of you in direct services. I am not a patient person, and I got so frustrated that no matter how long my workday was, there were always more people at the end of the line that needed help, and it wasn't getting any shorter. And so I decided to run to try to change the policies, because that's how we make those shorter lines and make sure that folks are in better positions where we have systems that aren't creating all of these challenges for folks. So really excited to be here with y'all today and talk about some of these issues.
Yeah, thank you both so much for giving us just a little bit of a picture into kind of what led you to where you are today. And it sounds like really definitely some shared experiences, like you said, Senator, between the two of you. And I think that's often the case when we talk to folks around Kentucky, that we all have, a lot of shared experiences here in the state. And it really probably has shaped the way that you all approach policymaking and maybe priorities that you have in Frankfort. So that's kind of what I want to go into next is, what are your focus areas in Frankfort as you're working as policymakers? And maybe any bills that are related to kids or families that you guys are working on this session that you'd like to highlight. Senator, I'll go to you first on that one.
Great, thank you for the question. I try to think every single day intentionally about our child poverty rate in Kentucky and the fact that more than 1 in 5 children live in poverty. And I try to ask myself, I don't do it every day, but I try to do it every day. What did I do today to help children live in poverty? Because I think that's something that should make us all sleep uneasy at night, that more than 1 in 5 kids in our state is living in poverty, and we have the tools to do something about it. So I really try to focus on tools to give resources to families, particularly young families with young kids, because that's my experience. I got sworn into my first elected office when my second child was 6 weeks old. And so one of my priorities is ending the sales tax on diapers, because we know that for the average family, they're going to spend over $1,000 a year per child on diapers. And we know that our assistance programs don't cover it. So for a family like me that had 2 kids in diapers at the same time, over $2,000 a year with no financial assistance. And it turns out that cutting the sales tax on diapers provides about the same amount of relief financially to a family making $50,000 a year as the income tax cuts that just went through, where you can save a family a couple $100s a year just by cutting the sales tax on diapers. So something that I feel like has a lot of bipartisan support, and I'm really hoping next year in a budget year we can get it over the finish line. Representative Duvall, I'm going to have to talk to you about we get some traction in the House on that one.
Absolutely.
The other bills, I really want to focus on how we support school meals and make sure that we're incorporating our local agricultural community in our school meals program to provide low-income kids with healthy meals at school, because we know it's so important to their success. And also just any bills we can look at to provide tax credits to families that are having to pay for childcare, or families that have young children that are low income. Anything we can do to put money into the pockets of low income families, I think is a good thing, because they invest that money right back into their families and into their kids.
Very good. And for me, I want to place a high priority in the upcoming years about nutrition and for our students. I'm alarmed by our obesity rates in Kentucky and really across the country. And if we want those opportunities for our kids in the next generation, we've got to do everything we can to make sure that they're growing up healthy. And so I think we've really got to focus a lot on nutrition and what are the chemicals that are out there that are in our food that shouldn't be, and those kind of things. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on that. This is not a simple solution, and it'll take years of work, but I'm committed to doing that, because I think it's the right thing to do, for our kids and for our future. So those are some things that I'm interested in. But education is another big aspect of my life. My wife's on the Warren County county school board, so I get to hear a lot about about what's going on in the schools. And so, one of my bills this session is House Bill 190, and so hopefully be being able to present that on the floor of the House in the next day or two. It's in the orders of the day, and so anyway, but what it does is it provides advanced coursework for students that are performing at or above average, basically. And so just giving those students the opportunities to reach their potential. I mean, in Kentucky, our commitment in education should be that we want every single child to reach their potential. And so we have to focus on that in many different ways.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And actually, both of you, very exciting to see our carrying items that Kentucky Youth Advocates has been prioritizing this session. So I would love to, Representative, I don't know if you could share a little bit about House Bill 187 that you're championing relating to the dual settlement dollars. Do you want to share with our advocates kind of what your priority is there and why you want that bill as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that goes back to being, healthier and being a healthier Kentucky and getting our kids healthier. So, so there was a dual settlement a few years ago, and we had about $14 million that the state was awarded. About half of that has already come into the state general fund. So we have about $7 million that's still outstanding that we're anticipating receiving over the next 4 or 5 years. What my bill does is it wants to take those remaining $7 million and put it into education to our students to let them know the dangers of vaping. I think there's this misconception out there that vaping is safe, and it's not, and we know it's not, and it's very disruptive to the school systems too. The discipline and constantly, I mean, people vaping in class. I mean, there's a lot of issues with it, but we need to make sure that those funds are directed toward helping students who are vaping to quit vaping, and then also preventative is really key. So I just want to see those dollars put to good use.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited to see that bill filed this session and appreciate you championing that effort. And Senator, I think I would love to hear from you as well, specifically about one of the bills that you have filed around some protections for families that are struggling with utility payments. So I think it is Senate Bill 137 related to extreme weather times and kind of what that could look like to protect families. Do you want to talk a little bit about that priority?
Sure. So it's a really limited measure that I'm really hoping we can get some I think there is some bipartisan support for this idea. That if the National Weather Service has issued either an extreme cold warning, an extreme heat warning, or there's some sort of ongoing natural disaster, that a utility company can't shut off someone's utilities during that time. We know that whenever we have these events, people die. We saw people die from the extreme cold in Louisville. We saw folks die throughout our state whenever we had the floods that ravaged all throughout Kentucky. And during this time, families just shouldn't have to be worried about, is my heat going to get turned off? Is my air going to get turned off? Am I going to be able to stay safely in my home? When you might be worried about that for a whole host of other reasons, you shouldn't be worried about that because of your utilities. And so it basically just has a protection while those events are in place. So again, very, very limited. But I do believe there's some bipartisan support for it because, again, that shouldn't be something that folks are worried about during these extreme weather situations.
Yeah, absolutely. We really appreciate you talking about that issue. I know there's also some folks in the House that are working on a similar bill, and we've at KYA we're prioritizing that issue as well, and especially for our youngest kiddos who really can be impacted greatly by those extreme temperatures. We would love to see those protections for families put in place.
Can I talk about one very closely related bill while we're on that?
Absolutely, please share.
Is one that would also say you can't actually remove a family from their home in the eviction process during those things when there's an extreme heat warning or an extreme cold warning. The sheriff's office would have to wait until those, or a natural disaster, the sheriff's office would have to wait until after those periods were over before you go physically remove a family and their belongings from their home. And so very similar, whenever you have these warnings saying stay safe, stay at home, we don't want folks being sort of disrupted and put out on the streets.
Yeah, I appreciate you highlighting that as well. I think that, like you said, those kind of go hand in hand, especially during those extreme weather events. So certainly issues that are impacting our Kentucky families and Kentucky kids, and would love to see those protections built in for our kids across the state. So as we sit here, it is day 21 of the 30-day session. There has been a lot that's already happened. I imagine there's going to be a lot more to come in the next 9 working days for you all. So we would love to hear from you guys about how have you seen, you guys sit in different chambers in the House and Senate. So Representative, I'll go to you first. How have you seen kids' issues be prioritized in your chamber among your colleagues? Is this something that is often kind of focused on in your perspective?
Yeah, well, and this is my first year serving on the Families and Children Committee, and so I just want to give a shout out to Representative Samara Heverin and her strong leadership. She has got a strong commitment to making our legislation better for families and for children, and so she's been a really good mentor to me as we've had many discussions about ways to improve things, and as you know, it's not an easy task. For some of the things that we've been looking at, there's several bills out there. We don't have time to cover them all. If I have to pick a couple here, I would say the transparency. So this is House Bill 242. This passed in the House 92-0. It's Representative Heverin's bill, but really it just provides more eyes on data for issues that are related to different things, so that really we can analyze that data to make sure we're providing the best information for our state and for public folks. But the transparency of that bill is real important. So I think that's really a good bill. I'm just trying to look at some others. I think the DUI bill was a big one. There's some heartbreaking stories that were shared on the floor of the House when Representative Raymer presented that. And so what that is, House Bill 220, and it makes DUI a Class D felony after the third subsequent offense within a 10-year period. And so, we've got to keep our roads safe and, for our families and our children. And so I think that one touched a lot of hearts. For me, personally, there's a bill that I'm actually going to be presenting in education tomorrow. It's House Bill 621. But basically, what we want to do is when there's a threat in a school and when a child makes a threat, we want to make sure that the courts have the ability to impose a fine to parents who have made that threat. So we want to do everything we can. We want to create a very safe environment in our school systems, and we're hoping that with parental accountability that will decrease those threats that are out there, because that is unfortunately it's becoming very much commonplace, especially down in Warren County. So those are just a couple of things that we need to do. Like I said, there's a lot of other bills, but
yeah, absolutely. There's over 1,000 filed between the two chambers this year. So certainly lots moving and lots that you could be focused on. So Senator, I'd love to hear from you. How have you seen kids' issues kind of prioritized in the Senate or among your colleagues?
Yeah, so I think kids' issues are prioritized. It's something that I think everyone shares the goal of creating opportunities for our young people, even when we disagree about what that means or how to get there. So we've done some bills around affordable housing and creating housing opportunities that I think absolutely will help our vulnerable families. We saw Danny Carroll's bill around juvenile justice and providing more mental health resources for justice involved youth. We saw a licensing bill that would require anyone that sells tobacco products to obtain a license with the state to be able to do that, with the idea that that's about making sure that these bad actor stores aren't selling vapes to our high school students. So we see those prioritized. I had a bill come out of the Senate, which would give coaches in particular more information about their role as mandatory reporters of child abuse. It turns out that coaches are mandatory reporters of child abuse, but unless they're employed by a district, which a lot of our coaches aren't because they're either volunteers or because they're in the private school system, they actually never receive any information about the fact that they are mandatory reporters or how to make a report about child abuse. We know coaches, we've seen a real rise in sexual abuse of student athletes. And so it's really important to make sure the whole coaching staff understands the the way to make those reports of abuse, but also just in general in the community. We know coaches see a lot of things in families, and helping them understand what to do when you see something, I think, is really important. And I think what I'll end with is my lesson learned from that bill, as I was going and talking to folks and saying, have you seen these statistics? Have you seen this investigative journalism that cites these 80 cases of kids who've experienced this type of abuse? I knew this, but it just reiterated, stories really matter, and hearing from people directly impacted really matters. And so I know we have a lot of advocates on this call, and I know you all know this, but just a reminder, those stories that you can bring of the people that you have worked with who have been harmed by loopholes in laws, things that we need to fix, that is how you gain momentum for these bipartisan laws to pass. I have rarely seen when there's something that is, truly like a common sense fix, and we're hearing those stories of the people who are hurt. Almost always people say, well, what do we do about that? How do we fix this? Of course, we want to solve that problem. And so I'm really grateful when you all are able to bring those stories to us, because it helps us be good policymakers and pass good laws.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. I think I'm hearing from both of you that especially child safety this year has been something that has really been focused on, which we are always, very happy to see that and see you all talking about ways to increase safety in all kinds of different spaces, whether that's in schools or in sports programs, or in their own homes. And I think, Senator, you just kind of got into one of my next questions, which is how do we focus more on the impacts on kids and families? It sounds like bringing those personal stories is really a good first step, is identifying if you have a personal story to bring to an issue. That could be a really good way to do it. Do either of you have other kind of ideas on how we can be more intentional? How are we highlighting the impacts on kids and families, or how could we do a better job with that?
I'm happy to just, the thing that I always tell folks is come with the story and then the facts to show me that it's not just one person. So tell me the story of the person that has been impacted, because that's what I remember when I leave a meeting and you tell me a story about someone who has been devastated by policies or is really struggling with something. I will remember that weeks later, and sometimes wake up at 3 a.m. worried about what we're going to do about it. But then give me the numbers that I can say, and this isn't just this person that was hurt. This is something that we see all throughout our community. So bring the stories that are going to stick with folks and motivate folks to want to enact change, but then also come with the numbers that tell us that something that needs to be on the policy agenda, because it's happening to more than one person. One person is too many, but whenever we see a systemic issue, that's when policy is really the right solution to spin.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's so important that we encourage folks to share their story, because a lot of times people feel that they're on an island, that nobody understands what they're going through, and that they're the only one dealing with this. And so bringing that story to light is crucially important, and being able to share that with legislators is important, so we can start putting our heads together and coming up with the best policies. And so I think about I think mental health is the bipartisan issue of the day. I think we all realize the need to invest in that. And so, I'm proud that in Warren County, we have a new crisis drop-off center that we're going to be breaking ground on soon. And we're hoping that it's going to be a model for the rest of the state. And so when folks are in crisis, adults or kids, either one, that those kids, they can be dropped off like immediately and get immediate care. They're not going to be waiting 4 or 5 hours or 24 hours, and they're going to be able to get help immediately. And so I think we've got to focus on those areas going forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for those insights. I think it's really I love that advice, that bring the personal story, but then also bring that data. I think somebody said in the chat, KYA, we love data. We love when you all talk about that, and really excited to hear kind of how that can play into those policy discussions, and also pair really well with personal stories, because we hear about those two things a lot, but I think putting them together is kind of the key there. And so as we are getting ready to wrap up in just a few minutes, we would love to hear from you all, just kind of advice or maybe some insight that you have. We have a lot of advocates on the call coming from different spaces, different backgrounds, and they're engaging this week throughout Children's Advocacy Week in all kinds of different ways. And approaching the General Assembly and getting involved in the change-making process, I think, can feel a little daunting at times to folks, especially if it's new or something they haven't done before. So what advice do you all have for folks that want to advocate for kids? They want to speak up. What should they be doing, or what could they be doing during the legislative session, but also throughout the whole year?
Well, I would just speak up and say I think that I've been I've been so impressed, and I've been doing this for 3 years now, but I've been so impressed with my fellow legislators that there is such a caring spirit in this place in Frankfurt, and so I think there is a real interest in hearing. We go back to hearing those stories, but developing those relationships, and that's you've got to reach out, and I would tell folks to not be shy and to schedule meetings either in Frankfurt or schedule meetings at home, with your legislator, because the reality is that we want to hear that, and the best legislation is going to come from hearing from the people that it's affecting the most. And so I say just keep building those relationships.
Thank you. Senator, anything to add there?
Yes, I absolutely agree, especially during the interim when we are not in Frankfurt. Reach out and build a relationship with the people who represent you. We work for you all. We are paid by your tax dollars. You're our bosses. During the interim, sit us down and tell us what you care about over a cup of coffee and tell us why it matters. And that's often all of my best legislative ideas come from constituents who have experienced systems and can tell me how we need to change them. The other thing I would say is when you're going to Frankfurt during session, the meetings are short. We are scheduled in 15, 20-minute increments, and it can be really helpful in terms of you all getting what you want to go into the meeting with a clear idea of what your ask is. So it's always great to share information. It's always great to hear people's stories. But, if your ask is you want us to co-sponsor a bill, your ask is when this is in committee, we want you to yes, your ask is we hope that you will, if you're a chairperson, hear this bill. Tell us that and make sure that you have a clear idea of what you're asking us to do in the legislative process so that we can be the most effective at helping you move your policy goals along. And so I would say the interim is the great time for relationships and ideas and brainstorming. And then during session, give us clear instructions. We're really busy. We have a million things happening. Give us a clear, I need a checklist of what I need to do to help achieve goals.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing that insight. I think it's so helpful to have just kind of the really clear guidance for advocates. And we talk at KYA a lot about the two sides of that, right? Building the relationship during those slower times of year, during the interim when there's a little more space to sit down and really have that conversation. And then during the session, yeah, straight to the point, let your elected folks know what you're looking for and what you're talking about. So really appreciate those insights. We are just about ready to wrap up for the day, but just want to thank you all again so much for being here. Again, out of a really busy day for both of you. I think you both had probably committees all day that you're running between. So appreciate the time and really just the intentional, thought you put behind the questions that we had for you all and sharing with our advocates today. So Senator Representative, we really appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Mara, who is going to close us out for the day and remind everyone about some more upcoming events that we have for the rest of the week.
Yes, thank you, Representative Duvall and Senator Cassie Chambers Armstrong. We really appreciate your time. I don't know, I saw you went off mute, Senator, if you wanted to share any final remarks, but
I was just going to say thank you for having me. That's all.
Okay, great. Well, we appreciate you.
Yeah. And thank you. It's been a pleasure being with you today.
Yes, yes. Thank you for your time. Well, and it's so great to hear from leaders from different chambers and different parties agree on so many issues. I saw you both shaking your head yes in agreement throughout your remarks. So it's always great to see that bipartisan action in real life. And as we heard, kids' issues are a priority among our General Assembly, with advocates speaking up on these issues and sharing their stories. We'll continue to emphasize that need and really galvanize their own elected officials to take action. So I know I dropped it in the chat throughout the conversation, but you can learn about many of these policy priorities that were discussed today and the bills that were mentioned on KYA's bill tracker. So be sure to check that out. And if you have not contacted your state senator or representative yet this session, today is the best time as ever to do so. So I dropped that link in there too, if you're unfamiliar with who that may be. And as we heard, don't be shy, reach out, build that relationship now and throughout the year. So we hope that that really inspired folks to take action today. So just a few Children's Advocacy Week reminders real quick. Tomorrow is the big day at the Capitol. So if you're able to join us in Frankfurt, we'll be gathering at 11 a.m. in the Rotunda. We'll have remarks from the governor and House and Senate leadership and several young people themselves. And then our final virtual event will be on Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern. And Ask Me Almost Anything with Senator Herron and Representative Dietz. And when you register for that event, you will be able to submit questions as well. So they'll be taking that as kind of a live Q&A. So we're really looking forward to that final virtual event. And as a reminder, all recordings of our events can be found on the KYA website on the Children's Advocacy Week landing page. It'll be right there at the top for you when you click into it. And thanks again to our many Children's Advocacy Week sponsors, and we hope to see you all tomorrow in Frankfurt.
Thanks for joining, everyone.